and drinks lots of water. He has a regular exercise program, all of those factors that go into making us the type of people that can be healthy and can be a good witness for what God can do in our lives. Dr. Ramirez, we're very happy to have you here with us this morning. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. I travel very much. In fact, just a few weeks ago, I was actually in Kenya. And look what I found in Kenya. He liked my snack, but he didn't like the fact that I tried to pet him. Beautiful beaches there also. They have a Mombasa in the Indian Ocean, and I found plenty of hungry fish there. Very nice and warm water there in the waters of the Indian Ocean. I want to invite each one of you. You receive this handout. This is something that will happen next Sabbath, if you're able to make it. The event will take place Friday, Saturday, and Sunday also. If you can just go for Saturday, if you can just go for Sunday, that's okay. And we'll have different experts. One of them is going to be coming all the way from California to teach coaching, how you can learn to motivate somebody to make those positive changes. We also have Dr. Brutus from Kettering, Ohio, the Adventist Hospital, and he'll be motivating you how to make those right choices to with inspiration and so forth. This is a free event. Anybody can come. If you want to stay in the campus, it's possible also to make arrangements. Just visit our website, awhn.org. And I'll give you this information from the beginning. I do a lot of research. You can find that research on Francisco Ramirez ResearchGate. Just Google that. I also have a very active Twitter account, Eddie RDMD. And also there's a YouTube page there and an Instagram page. For example, what type of things I put on my Twitter account? This is JAMA, top journal in the world of medicine. How not doing exercise is worse than smoking, diabetes, and heart disease. So is exercise important? Well, this morning I went out, had a nice exercise session in the surrounding area where I was staying. This other one, 2 recent studies were showing that exercise makes you more happy than money. How many people are working overtime because they want to make more money and they think that's going to make them happier? Well, actually, getting yourself some comfortable shoes and doing some exercise would do the job. This one, New England Journal of Medicine, one of the top journals of medicine, showing how cow's milk is a non-essential nutrient. You don't need to drink this. The marketing department has convinced you that if you don't give milk to your child, it's child abuse. That's not necessarily what science shows. And you can have a healthy child without it. This one, the oldest male on earth, they asked him, what is his secret for his longevity? He gave 2 tips. Number 1, don't get angry. That's very wise. When you get angry, you generate what are called the oxygen-free radicals, and those free radicals damage your arteries, giving you heart disease and stroke. They actually increase your risk of cancer, so you need to keep those emotions at bay. And his second secret, always smile. Okay, that's also something very good. In fact, the exercise says smile even when you don't feel like. If you smile when you don't feel like, it actually has a positive effect, changing your emotions. And also, I like to follow this topic of the coronavirus very closely. This is a very interesting study. One of the experts from Johns Hopkins University demonstrating how natural immunity, if you already had the coronavirus infection, is literally as if you had the vaccine. That's very clear what the research shows, and it is lasting. There was a worry, it's not going to last, they would say. That's not what the research shows. Go and find this article there on my Twitter, and go and read the published studies. The links are actually there, very well written article about it. So, some of the research I do, for example, this patient of ours, he was a classic patient that comes to us. This is from Weimar, up in Northern California. Patient had diabetes. He was taking one medication. Patient had high blood pressure, and his blood pressure was not good, even though he was taking 2 medications for that blood pressure. And he also had other secondary issues, problems sleeping, low energy, and so forth. In a matter of 18 days, this is how fast healing takes place. In 18 days, by following a complete plant-based diet, doing the exercise, the rest, the spirituality, and so forth, after he lost only 16 pounds, we had to stop his blood pressure medication and his diabetes medication because his glucose came down to normal, his blood pressure started coming down to normal levels. Now, he didn't finish and said, oh, I'm going to go back to my old habits. No, he learned his lesson very well, and he continued with those changes at home. And in a matter of 6 months, he already has lost 83 pounds. Still, he continues with no blood pressure medication, no diabetes medication. 11 months later, we do complete analysis, and you can see his blood pressure perfect without any blood pressure medication. His cholesterol perfect. This is where you should be, by the way. Your cholesterol should be under 150. A lot of heart attacks happen on 170, 180. You need to lower it to 150. And LDL, the bad cholesterol, 61. Perfect. That's where your LDL should be. Your goal should be 75 and under for your LDL cholesterol. Also, his prostate actually improved. And not only that, this is the most surprising number. That number, called the Hemoglobin A1c, of somebody that does not take diabetes medication, a number under 6 means he's no longer diabetic. His diabetes went into remission. See, I have 24 years of working in these lifestyle centers. And this is not something that, oh, I've seen, once every 20 years I've seen this. No, every single program we see this type of change. And you can see here, after only a year and a half, after losing 141 pounds, you can see the difference. No longer obese, no longer diabetic, no longer hypertensive. Is that good news or bad news? This is good news, isn't it? By the way, go to website newstart.com if you want to know more about that program. Also, this other study that we published, what we did, we took all the patients that had high blood pressure in 1 year up from Weimar lifestyle program. And what we discovered there is that 93% of those patients, by the end of the program, the majority of them were no longer taking any blood pressure medication. Not because they're irresponsible, but there's a team of physicians following those patients and making adjustments at the medication. That is how fast these lifestyle changes improve. This one on hydrotherapy, how hydrotherapy, one of the best preventions and treatments for COVID-19. Also, I helped write this guide. This is a practical guide. It tells you everything you need to be doing to keep that immunity up and going. And also, the people that are coming to the seminar, they are actually receiving this book that I wrote. It's called Pandemic Busters. And this book, tells you the overall picture of all the things you need to take into account to improve your immunity and improve your odds. In parentheses, the electronic version of this book, the Kindle version, will be free next weekend. So if you know of some people that may benefit from reading this book, well, go ahead and send them a message. Just find it on Amazon. Just put Pandemic Busters and send them the link and let them know that next weekend they can get the Kindle version for free. Now, some people say, but doctor, why is this coronavirus so complicated? Why don't we stop it? Well, trying to stop this coronavirus is like trying to stop this fish. It's very simple how to stop this fish. Look at that. So the question is not how you're going to stop it. The question is, are you going to be ready when you fight it? And that's why, certain interventions that are coming up that can help us improve our odds. Now, this is not something new nor surprising. If you remember the words of Jesus, when Jesus was asked, what will be some characteristics that we are going to see before your coming? And he started detailing a few things that were going to be very prevalent before his coming. We find that in Matthew 24:7. He said some of them, for example, for nation shall rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. Is that happening today? You just open the newspaper, isn't it? And this one, is fighting against this other one, and this one is also preparing to fight this other one, and you can see this in multiple places on earth. And the verse continues, there shall be famines. Is there famines today? Sadly, yes. This is from the United Nations, how there are 20 important hot spots where there are major issues with food security. And there will be earthquakes in diverse places. Now, some people say, well, doctor, earthquakes, there's long history. There's have been multiple earthquakes throughout the history of this planet. Well, that is true, but not with the intensity and frequency that we're seeing it today. For example, if you go and check the statistics, from 1900 to 1910, there was 3 earthquakes 6.0 and higher. Now, if you measure from 1990 to 2000, there were 943 earthquakes 6.0 and higher. Little difference? Huge difference. And see, the terminology there in Matthew 24 is like a lady that is about to give birth. And ladies that you have given birth, you can tell this story, isn't it? How those contractions started to become more frequent and more powerful before the baby came out. And the baby was born with the doctor or in spite of the doctor. That baby comes out because it comes out. In the same way, that is what we are witnessing around us. You can see how things around us is more frequent and more intense. And another thing that is mentioned in Matthew 24, there's going to be what? Pestilences. Is there any pestilences nowadays? It literally stopped this world, isn't it? The pestilence that we are actually in the middle of it. And the evidence is clear. As it says in Acts of the Apostles, there is in the world today many who close their eyes to the evidences that Christ has given to warn men of his coming. They seek to quiet all apprehension, while at the same time, what's happening? The signs of the end are rapidly fulfilling. And the world is hastening to the time when the Son of Man shall be revealed in the clouds of heaven. See, there is something that is called emerging infectious diseases, and that's what we're going to learn about today. See, those emerging infectious diseases, COVID-19 is just one of many of those diseases. There are many diseases today that we didn't have a clue about them that they existed. For example, today we're going to learn what's going to be the next pandemic we're going to face. If you think that COVID was bad, wait until you see the next one that is coming. It's going to be called the Pandemic Influenza. We're going to learn today where this one is going to come out. Now let us explore one of those emerging infectious diseases, one of these new diseases that didn't exist. We need to go back to 1981. When was 1981? Just remember in your head when Ronald Reagan was the president of this country. Back when he was president of this country, the CDC puts out this report called the MMWR. And they report on the latest diseases that are coming up. And in this report in 1981, they reported for the first time, they found a cluster, they found a group of homosexual males in Los Angeles and San Francisco that were having a very strange pneumonia. Now, pneumonia is something that we find very often in the clinical practice. But this pneumonia was a very different type. This is not the pneumonia that we usually face every day. Did you know that this was the first report worldwide of something that would become the Epidemic of Aids? And what happened with just a few people back in 1981, today it has killed more than 32 million people. So we know that, promiscuous sexual behavior, IV drug use have spread this virus, but where did it come from in the first place? We're going to learn today where the AIDS came from originally. And I'm talking about many new emerging infectious diseases, diseases that we didn't have not too long ago, such as Ebola, West Nile, Lyme Disease, and the list goes on and on. Now, we have a tool by the name of medical anthropology. Medical anthropologists, what they do, they go and through different evidences, they find out where disease come from. And let's see where some of the common diseases that we have, where did they came from? Here is one of them, smallpox. Where did the smallpox come? It came from camels. Close contact of humans with camels, a virus that naturally is in the camels, was able to jump and infect the humans. Whooping cough. This is an extremely infectious bacteria, and it causes this cough that you cannot even breathe. You get purple from the coughing fits that you get from this. Very common actually worldwide. Vaccine has helped very much to decrease the incidence here in America, but it used to be something very common. It came from the close contacts of humans with pigs. There's a reason why in Leviticus it says, don't eat it and don't even touch it. No, that's what it says there in Leviticus about these pigs. Typhoid fever, where did it come from? It came from the contact of humans with chickens. In fact, most of the eggs you find, even the organic ones, have the typhoid in them. Also, measles, which has killed more than 200 million people. It came from the close contact of humans with cows and sheep. Influenza, the famous influenza that hits, every winter, where did it come from? It came from the close contacts of humans and ducks. Now, just think a little bit. Do you think those ducks that are flying in the skies are the ones that infect us? No. I had to have the duck here in front of my face, isn't it? So the duck could sneeze or somehow, his secretions could come into me. And then the virus could mutate, and that's the way that it entered into our system. I had to domesticate these animals so that I could get very close to them. And leprosy, it came from the contact of humans with the water buffalo and also the armadillo. The armadillo is a natural reservoir for leprosy. Don't touch these creatures. And the common cold actually has been traced down to horses. This is an excellent book by Jared Diamond. I have this book, Guns, Germs, and Steel. And he does a really good job documenting how certain diseases came into humans. And he tells a very interesting fact. It is so interesting that when the Europeans came to the American continent, the Europeans didn't get infected of diseases of the Americas. It was actually the opposite. When they came here, they infected many natives of the diseases that were common and prevalent in Europe. Why is that? Well, it's interesting because in the Americas, there were no plagues. But if you check the history in Europe, you will see that plagues was a common occurrence in Europe. And they would come and come and come on a regular basis, decimating a lot of the population there in Europe. And he tells a story, very interesting, in chapter 11, how many of those diseases, many of those plagues that the Europeans were suffering were the result of domesticating animals. See, in the continent of America, the natives here, they didn't domesticate animals. Sure, they killed buffalo, but they didn't have them round up in one place as the Europeans used to do. If buffalo were running wild, they would go and kill one of them and eat it. Well, the Europeans were rounding up things. Also, Europeans brought multiple animals to this continent that were not here. Did you know there was no cows here? There was no chickens here. There was no pigs here. There were no goats here. There was no sheep here. Those things were brought by the Europeans into this continent. Therefore, no pigs, well, no pertussis, no whooping cough, no chickens, there was no typhoid fever here. There were no horses, there was no common cold. So those diseases were developed due to that. But you go and check the history of Europe, and you will see that millions and millions of Europeans were dying on a regular basis by the Black Plague and this next plague and the other plague and the other plague, constantly decimating the population of Europe. Now, things started changing with the advent of the Industrial Revolution. And now, the way that people live started changing. Most of our ancestors were people involved in agriculture. And as machines started making the job of many people started migrating to centers of population. And by changing the way they ate and they exercised, diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, cancer started increasing very much due to the change that the way of living. Also, the advent of important public health measures helped very much. For example, with the advent of antibiotics, with the advent of vaccines, many of the common infectious diseases that were killing many people were able to be controlled to a certain point. And then back in the 60s, notice how the experts started documenting this. This virologist, Mark Farlane, he says, is almost to write of something that has passed into history. The most likely forecast about the future of infectious diseases is that it will be what? Very dull. It's very dull today, isn't it, the infectious diseases? Look at this one, the Surgeon General in 1968. The war against infectious diseases, what? Has been won. The Dean of Jail School. No new diseases are to be discovered. Well, he didn't come to the 2021. But you know, something happened in the history of this planet. Infectious diseases started decreasing dramatically, to the point that back in the 40s, the 50s, we really thought that we had won the battle against infectious diseases. But something happened. In the 60s, and sometime then, infectious diseases started picking up, and we are seeing a tremendous increase of infectious disease. Now, let me tell you a very interesting story that is going to help us understand this change in history. I originally grew up in Mexico. Okay? And when I was in my 20s, I moved to Norway. In fact, I speak Norwegian because I lived there for many years. And when I got to Norway, I realized that Norway was very different from Mexico. It was, much more stable, economically speaking, the government much more honest, things were functional, wealth is distributed very equally there. Everybody has it well there. There's not such thing as the bad side of town and the good side of town, but rather everybody has it quite nicely. And I said to myself, I'm going to figure out why Norway is such a prosperous country. So what I did, I went to the local library to start reading the history of Norway. And I got shocked. As I started reading that history of Norway, I realized that Norway also had the same challenges that Mexico had. Abuse of power, very poor people, very rich people, this kind of separation, social problems, and so forth. But something happened to Norway that didn't happen to Mexico. A message of somebody by the name of Martin Luther arrived to the country, and it literally transformed the way people operate and the way people thought. And this created a macro change at the level of the country. And I had the privilege now of traveling all over the world, literally. I've been to 85 countries sharing my research and speaking. And now I can see the pattern very clearly as I've been visiting many of those countries. You show me the country where that message arrived of Protestantism, I'm going to show you the most prosperous countries on earth. And you can go in the list. You have Canada and America. You have England, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland. You have Holland, Germany, Switzerland. These are the countries that people risk their lives to try to migrate to those countries. And then through the influence of the British, another colony in Asia by the name of Singapore. Man, tremendously prosperous country. And in the same peninsula, you have Singapore in the bottom, and you just cross into Malaysia, man, it's another world down there. A totally different world. You have another colony by the name of Hong Kong, tremendously prosperous country. Also, you have South Korea, the country in Asia with the highest number of Protestants. And then you have Australia and you have New Zealand. All those countries, tremendously prosperous countries. You just go to their neighboring country and you can see the big difference. But something happened to those countries. As that transformation took place, changes in their philosophy continue to occur. And today, many of those countries are extremely secular today. And they forgot about their roots. In fact, you see, for example, in New Zealand, even though a country only has 3.5 million inhabitants, more than 650 people in New Zealand feel lonely, and the most lonely are which age? 15 to 24. Now, if you go and check which people in New Zealand claim to have no religion, you're going to see that that population bracket happened to be the most common. And many of these countries are having an existential crisis. In fact, when you see the pattern of suicides worldwide, you show me the most secular countries, the most agnostic countries, I'm going to show you the highest suicidal rates in the world. Because when you remove God from the equation, what's going to give you hope and what's going to give you that motivation to go forward? And that is exactly what this country started facing. What some sociologists call the effect of the rose. If you have a rose and you cut down that rose and you have that rose in your hand, is the rose alive? Yes or no? It's alive. But what's going to happen to this rose? It's gonna die very soon. And that is exactly what we are witnessing. Many of the things that made this country prosperous, we are forgetting about those principles. And especially this type of changes started occurring in the 1950s and 1960s. And let me show you some very interesting statistics. For example, percentage of girls that had premarital sexual relationships, you can see around that time the tremendous increase in that type of behavior. Sexually transmitted diseases, specifically gonorrhea, among teenagers 10 to 14 years old, tremendous increase around that time. Birth rates of single girls 10 to 14 years old. Around that time, you see the tremendous increase. Now, out of whack births, you can see also, compare the 60s to 1995, tremendous increase. Single people living together, you can see it's 1963 to the current time. Divorces, up. Child abuse, up 2,300%. Illegal drug use, up 6,000%. Violent crimes, compare the 1963 to today. SAT scores, SAT scores. Suicides among teens. Can you see where this thing is going? Tremendous increase of multiples of these factors. So, the same thing happened in the world of microbiology, in infectious diseases. We started seeing a tremendous increase of those emerging infectious diseases around that time. In fact, by the time that 1975 came, there were 30 new diseases they had never heard about it. And you can see in this map some of those new emerging infectious diseases. tremendous increase all over the world. And organizations around the world are very worried about this tremendous increase of these diseases. As it says in this book, depending on the present policies and actions, this situation will lead to what? Catastrophic storm of microbial threats. So, let's see some of those new emerging diseases. This one, 1975, was the first time that we identify and diagnose somebody with Lyme disease. Have you guys heard of Lyme disease? Pretty much every single hand here is familiar with this. Before 1975, it didn't exist, this disease. And today, 50 states have Lyme disease, an emerging infectious disease. Why the tremendous increase of this disease? We can explain it in the following way. As people started moving to the suburbs, okay, they started going into areas that there was just forests, and they started cutting those woods in order to make their homes there. Now let me ask you this. If you build a home in one of those settings, who would you rather have walking outside your home? Would you rather have wolves and mountain lions and coyotes walking outside your home? Would you like those animals to be walking around your homes? No, isn't it? So people started shooting those animals, and they started decreasing in number tremendously. And what ended up happening? Well, those animals that are supposed to keep in check other animal populations, now deer, a rabbit, and many other animals started increasing tremendous in number because there was no predators to keep them in check. Well, the tick that bites those animals now had more food, therefore it could multiply much more. And now, as you know, populations go up and down, as populations of deer sometimes go down, now you have all these ticks. Who are they going to bite? Well, humans now became, the target for many of those ticks. Not only that, something that is called fragmentation of forest. If you go to a forest, you're going to see that animals like to move in certain paths, okay, in the forest. But when you go and build homes and roads and you cut down those natural paths, that means that now animals that used to keep themselves in the forest, now they come in closer contact with humans because we are interrupting their natural migrating paths. And we changed the way that animals live, and now we see a tremendous increase on diseases like Lyme disease. Another infectious groups of diseases. Argentina created a new economic model. Argentina had many forests, virgin forests. And what they decided as a policy, they started cutting down those forests, and they started putting animals in those forests. Well, the fact that they started going inside those forests, there were many native diseases in those forests, and with that close contact, many of those diseases started jumping into the humans because we went inside those forests. And South America as a whole started using this model. So today, you see here all kinds of new diseases that didn't exist before. These are emerging infectious diseases that are new. And also, a similar story happened in Africa. You have these new emerging diseases called the hemorrhagic fever virus. Do they sound like a nice virus, these ones? No, I can tell you, these are a very nasty group of viruses. Diseases such as Ebola are part of that virus group. And what is this disease? The person starts bleeding from their eyes, from their ears, from their nose, with this virus attacking and very infectious to others. Where did this virus came from? Well, business people realized that the forest in Africa, they had very good quality wood. So what they did, they sent crews of workers to cut that wood. Now think a little bit of the situation. Here you have a group of workers that is going way inside a forest. What are they going to eat? I mean, they had some lunch, but after 2 weeks or so, your lunch runs out. There's no, agriculture there. They can go and, and pick up, food. There's no market that you can go and buy food. You're there in the middle, of a virgin forest. What are you gonna eat? So many of them started killing multiple types of monkeys in order to survive. And this is the famous bush meat. Today has been documented more than 26 different types of monkeys that are killed for food. And sadly, these people like the taste of this, and they brought this into the cities. And now this is a common occurrence. You go to the cities and you can find all kinds of different monkeys being eaten. Did you know that the famous Ebola, this is where it came from? They started eating these primates, and that's how Ebola jumped into the humans. Did you know that this is the way that AIDS came into humans? AIDS, HIV, was a natural virus that was in primates. And as they tried to catch some of these monkeys, there was a fight, and the monkey probably bit the person, and there was some exchange of blood, and that's how originally the virus came into humans. Yes, the sexual behavior and so forth, this spread this like wildfire all over the place, but originally that's the way that it jumped into humans. And sadly, we have not reached the top of this disease. We see more and more AIDS every year. Countries in Asia and countries in Africa are being devastated by this plague. In fact, I remember when I visited Tanzania, there was some towns there that there were only children and elderly people. Where do you think the average adults were? Were gone. AIDS had devastated those countries, and sadly, most of those children were HIV positive. Now, the problem in Asia also, compounding these emerging diseases, are the wet markets, in which you have all these different animals in one place. You think this is good? So animals that God never intended for them to be close together, here you have the perfect environment for viruses to jump from one to another, to mutate and become extremely harmful. For example, let me take you to one of those wet markets in Asia. In this wet market in Asia, you can see, for example, here are the bats without wings. And this person there, he's cutting the famous wings of the bat. And there you have the whole pile of these wings. And then, just next door, in the next table, here you have this guy chopping off this snake. So, as they're chopping off things, man, the blood is being splashed, and you can infect somebody very easy. See, the bats have little hands. Look at that, at the end of the wings. And then you just go to the next door, and there you have, they have these different rats there that they're going to eat. And then just next to it, you have a cat there. And then you have some pig there. And then you just walk a few more tables there. There's even more bats there. And you walk out, and they have the poor dogs. Look at that they killed. And then you have there the next dogs that are next. Look at that. And now you have the cats. And look at the things these people eat. Look at that. This big lizard that they eat. Do you think that a new disease is going to come from here? See, genetically speaking, we can actually trace down the famous COVID-19. I know right now the controversy that it came from a lab or not. It's very clear that the COVID-19 passed through bats, another animal called the pangolin. You can Google it if you want to see it. And another animal called the civet cat. This virus jumped from there like that. And the new pandemic influenza, the one I told you, is going to come from here. This is not natural. This is not the way that God wants us to treat animals. Just think about it. Here you have this environment, no sunlight to disinfect, no fresh air, feeding them all these artificial things, and then those chickens in constant stress so their immune system is low. Man, this is the perfect environment for those viruses to mutate. Think about like Las Vegas. You know that game they have? They pull the little thing and then it gives you 7, 7, 7, 7. Okay? That's exactly what's happening. Things are mutating, and one of these days we're going to get the 7777. The perfect mutation so that this thing becomes tremendously infectious. And we're talking about a virus that can have a mortality of 40, 50, 60%. Man, this is not going to be pretty. And we have had some beginnings of this. The Avian Flu, have you heard about the Avian Flu? Okay. See, those had the mutations, but not all the perfect mutations. Soon, we will have those mutations unless we change the way that we treat animals. It's the reason why Councils on Diets says, the light that God has given me is that the curse of God is on the earth, the sea, the cattle, on the animals. There soon will be no safety in the possession of flocks or herds. The earth is decaying under the curse of God. And that's what we are witnessing in front of our eyes. So in closing, let's put this in perspective. COVID has killed millions. SARS, number 1, this happened about 10 years ago, killed thousands. Nipah, didn't have time to talk about this. This is a virus that came out of pigs with a mortality rate of 40%. Tremendously dangerous. In fact, they think they can use this thing for bioterrorism. And Streptococcus suis, another virus that came from pigs. And AIDS have killed millions. And we need to change our behaviors, or we are going to end up with that nasty influenza, the one I'm telling you, unless we change the way we treat animals. So, the light given me is that it will be not very long before we shall have to give up any what? Animal food. Even milk will have to be discarded. Disease is accumulating rapidly. Why is that? The curse of God is upon the earth because what? Man what? Has cursed. So as we have forgotten about God, there are consequences to this. So let us leave those animals alone and let us cling to the Lord, that can help us have hope for the future. As it says in 2 Timothy 1:7, for God has not given us what? Spirit of fear, but what? Power and of love and a sound mind. Notice the progression. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love. What do you do with love? You love your neighbor. You serve your neighbor. You make their life much better to those around you. And as a result of that, God is going to help us have a sound mind during these tremendous times in which we live. May God bless us. May we continue our mission that God has given us in this place so that He can come back very soon. May God bless you.